My name is Anthony Zaner, and I'm a student at the University of Kansas. I'm studying strategic communications in the School of Journalism and Mass Communications. This presentation is for a course on international journalism, and we were tasked to research how media is ran in foreign countries. This presentation will be over how independent Russian journalists fight censorship, especially focused on how they fight censorship during the war with Ukraine. Tensions between these two countries are high, which makes journalism during this time even more important. I am interested in this topic because Russia holds a lot of power in the world. The country tends to intimidate other countries, and there's an aspect of fear related to them. I was most interested to research this because of the high contrast between Russian and American media. The research used for this project was conducted by reading articles related to the topic. Most of the information came from scholarly articles or databases. I used sources that I deemed credible and had relevance to what I was looking for in particular. The first step I took to research this was finding an angle to go from. From there, I created a thesis and a short summary of what I wanted to research. After that, I created an outline highlighting all of the points I thought were important for the topic. From there, I created a list of sources and I started to research. Before jumping into everything, it's important to know the background of Russian media. Russian media has been censored and controlled by the government for quite some time. They're restricted on what they can report on and where they get this information from. Putin censors the media as a form of control. The news in Russia does not follow the standards that we have here in America. The news is not always necessarily credible, which can leave the population with a distorted view of reality. This can be very dangerous when a population does not know the truth about what is happening around them. Russia and Ukraine have been hostile towards each other since 2014 when the Ukrainian Revolution happened. Russia wanted dominance over Ukraine, so in February of 2022, they invaded. Putin also threatened to use nuclear weapons and justified this by comparing it to the US when we used these weapons during World War II with Japan. Due to the Non-Proliferation Treaty of 1968, Russia actually has the power to build and store nuclear weapons. This is something that the Ukraine lacks, which makes the situation much worse for them. Ukraine used to hold a collection of nuclear weapons, but it was seized by Russia in the 1990s. The media in Russia is highly regulated and full of restrictions on what reporters can and cannot do. Firstly, they're restricted on where they can get their information from. It must be from a government official source. This will alter the credibility of the news that is going out to society. Another thing that the media can't do is use the word invasion in their reporting. The terms they can use instead of invasion is they can call it a special operation. Another factor in this is any foreign media outlet that is reporting on them must label their article as being written by a foreign agent. Independent journalists struggle because of these regulations that the government has put in place. They're either forced to quit their professions or lie in their work. This is troublesome because the entire basis of journalism is transparency and truth. Without that, journalists are just left to write fiction in their stories. To combat this, journalists are forced to cease their operations in Russia and relocate to another country to report. Journalists also have to worry about their lives being threatened by anyone opposed to what they're doing or what they're writing about. Putin has put out regulations regarding what he deems as fake news. His terms are pretty vague, which allows him to punish journalists as he sees fit. Fake news could be calling it a war or an invasion. Simply put, fake news to Putin is anything that goes against him or Russia as a whole. The punishment for breaking these rules can be quite gruesome. Journalists have to deal with threats, being followed, their offices being bombed, and much more. Failure to comply to these rules can result in a 15-year prison sentence or a fine, or both. Because of these regulations, Russia has very little freedom of speech. The Press Freedom Index measures and ranks every country on the amount of freedom of speech they allow. Russia is ranked 155 out of the 180 countries, 1 being most free on this scale. Meduza is one of Russia's independent media companies. They worked through the restrictions by sharing information through an app they had, which is much harder to block than a website. Once the war started, they were forced to relocate their office, which was difficult because they had a lack of resources. Their work led to many more movements to help Russia become better. One independent journalist protested on live television during the war. Marina Ovsyannikova worked for the station that she protested on because she had enough of the restrictions placed on reporters. Her sign says no war, followed by Russian text, and at the bottom, Russians against war. One possible reason for the invasion was because Putin wanted to assert dominance over the Western cultures. Putin sees himself already at war with the West, and he would do anything to undermine their military efforts to counter the Russian invasion. Putin uses his control to dominate his citizens and countries around Russia. By controlling the media, Russian citizens are misinformed. When they don't know what is going on, they can be left hopeless, and this makes them much easier to control, which is what Putin wants.